Well, the blended retirement system series is finally complete, and I'm sure some of you are glad to hear that. I think it's time that we talk about something other than boring forms, all sorts of numbers, and bits of public law. I'm going to tell you about an effort that has been ongoing in my region for quite a while now. Like any good story, it is rife with ups and downs, victories and defeats. I'll begin with how this project began, and then continue with the most recent story to develop from it. The name of the lady who inspired this endeavor is real. I have permission to use her name and to tell her story in the efforts of identifying and assisting people who face similar situations as hers. All other names, and in many cases locations, have been changed in order to protect privacy. Well, let's move on to the story, shall we? In late 2013, Mrs. Kathleen Fettinger approached our Survivor Outreach Services section to inquire about any service benefits her husband may have earned. The SOS coordinator, Mr. Fraser Thompson, asked me to join in the conversation after a few minutes. I was only a few desks away at the time. Mrs. Fettinger's husband, Gerard, had passed away 2 years before after a multi-year battle with cancer. He was 62 years old when he died. As the conversation developed, we soon discovered that Master Sergeant Fettinger had never applied for his military pension when he turned 60. His physical and mental condition had deteriorated significantly as a result of his medical treatments. This caused him to completely forget about his military service and his retirement benefits. Mrs. Fettinger also was not aware that he had earned anything of the sort to include survivor benefits. Naturally, we jumped at the chance to assist this lady. To further sadden the situation, the amount of retirement that Master Sergeant Fettinger would have received, along with the TRICARE benefit, would have been enough to keep them from having to declare bankruptcy. The short answer is we were able to assist her, and after a year-long battle and rather wait from the Army Board for the Correction of Military Records to make its decision, we also obtained all of the retired pay her husband would have received. So that's the good story. Later that day, after Mrs. Fettinger had left us, I was talking with a volunteer who was helping us in retirement services about her case. We were stunned by the fact that someone had not applied for the benefits he had earned at the right time. As the conversation progressed, we began to wonder how many others out there were like Mrs. Fettinger. The good news was I had the tools to answer that question. Over the course of the next several weeks, I scoured our retirement services database, information from Army Human Resources Command, and the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. Ultimately, a list of 45 names appeared. My volunteers, members of the Survivor Outreach Services section, other co-workers, and I began to search for these people. We dubbed our efforts the Fettinger Project in honor of Mrs. Fettinger and her husband. As of this telling, all but one of those people have been located. That last guy is living off the grid in a cabin somewhere in the forest of North Carolina. I've had no luck at all reaching him. I would like to tell you about the last person we found on that list. Who knows? I might make this into a recurring series of good and sometimes bad stories. Sergeant John Jackson was a man I feared we would never find. He was 7 years late in applying for pay. 7? No, 9 years late in applying for pay. Not only did he have a very common name and live in a very large city with dozens of people with that name and similar age, his contact information was also so old as to be completely useless. Pretty much, I had given up on him. There was still that needling urge to keep trying from the little man in the back of my head, though. Every now and then, when I had a moment at work, when I had a moment to breathe, I would continue in the search. A few months ago, Mr. Thompson, who I mentioned earlier, introduced me to a smartphone app that had actually helped me locate a man on that list. I decided to try again one morning during some downtime at a leadership conference a few weeks ago. Of course, there were again several names on the list which could have been Sergeant Jackson. One of them, though, had a previous address, which was the one I had in my old records. I dug deeper into the profile on the app. In the list of possible addresses was another bit of information, the time first and last seen near that address. In a way, it's kind of scary how much information is online. The address at the top of the list, had this information as well. I gasped, though, in audible dismay when I read it. The last time he was seen in that area was 2008. I actually felt chills at this point. Could he have died years before, and we were never able to help him as a result? I dug further, this time using a search engine, and felt myself crash even further. I found his obituary and the place where he was buried, a state cemetery in the northern part of the state. He was 59 when he passed away. I remember releasing my pent-up breath at this point. It was over. I had found him too late. In fact, I was 5 years too late when I even began looking for him. Failure. Complete, abject failure. The worst sensation imaginable in this line of work. I had failed to help him and his family. Or had I? Another thought came into my mind. Wasn't Sergeant Jackson married? Was she still alive? I delved into the records I had on him and found his survivor benefit election. There it was. He was married to Gloria. Was she still with us? Could I find her, perhaps? Back to the app I went. Almost instantly, I found a name with the correct age. It even had the last address I had for Sergeant Jackson. There were 2 possible phone numbers. By this time, a coworker had walked up and noticed my obvious intensity. I quickly explained what had happened in the last few minutes. He visibly paled and then brightened again as he listened. I picked up my cell phone and dialed her number, a silent prayer on my lips. The other side of the phone rang, twice, and then went to voicemail. I left a message and immediately tried the other number. It rang incessantly. I tried those numbers fanatically over the next 3 days. There was no change. The first number always went to voicemail after 2 rings, and the second just rang on and on. The specter of defeat was looming again. What was I to do now? A strange thought came to me at that point. Several weeks earlier, I had located one of the few people left on the Fettinger list by asking assistance of the local police department. In that case, I had contacted a police operator and simply asked whether that person actually lived in the town or not. Upon hearing my story, the operator decided to call him and give him my number. The retiree called back half an hour later. Would this option work for Mrs. Jackson, maybe? I decided to try it. I called the local police and recited my tale to the operator. At first, I thought it did no good whatsoever. The operator said he would look into it. How vague a response could I expect, though? I was asking for the personal information of a private citizen. The next day, however, I got a bit of a surprise. The deputy chief of police called me and left a message. We then played phone tag for another day, before finally catching each other near our phones. He listened to my more descriptive version of the story and made a decision on the spot. He would go to Mrs. Jackson's house and deliver the message. "It will be my feel-good story for a Friday," he said. That was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I figured I would not hear anything further until Monday. So for the next half hour, I tried to plan some training with a coworker, but we were interrupted by a visit from our former branch chief. The work slowly devolved into what many office workers on a Friday afternoon do, just goofing off and waiting for quitting time. Even I, a noted workaholic, am susceptible to that on occasion. Our talk continued until the phone rang. I answered it in a casual tone, since I expected it to be just another request for information, just the average phone call I get every day. "Hello, this is Gloria Jackson," I heard through my Bluetooth headset. I nearly sprang out of my chair. My coworker scooted away from me slightly to give me room. Having overheard my call with the deputy chief, he knew what was happening. I vaguely remember him telling the former branch chief about it as I answered Mrs. Jackson. She was alive and well. She had a different address and phone number, but she had finally been found. The deputy chief had left his card with a message at her house, and a friend had contacted her at work. She had taken a break and called me right away. Count your minor miracles. Mrs. Jackson asked who I was, why I was looking for her, and what it had to do with her husband. I explained it all. Amazingly, she was very much like Mrs. Fettinger, especially in the way she responded. She did not know her husband had earned a pension, and also did not know about the survivor benefit. She was obviously skeptical. That was plain to see. Maybe I was a scam artist, she may have thought. I tried to talk her through her suspicion. I couldn't let this small victory slip away. She finally agreed to meet me, but only in a public place. I said she could choose any location she liked. She suggested the station where the deputy chief worked. I agreed instantly and arranged a time. I was 2 hours away and needed time to get there. I then called the deputy chief, who readily acquiesced to my request to use his facility. I was practically shooed out of the office by all of my coworkers. They were quite familiar with my obsession about this project. I have practically a mobile office in my vehicle, which is useful. I have a printer, office supplies, etc. All I had to do was pop my work laptop off its docking station and throw it in its travel bag. After topping off the gas tank, I was on the way. I began to think about the implications of what I was about to do. Not the meeting of a retiree or a spouse outside of the office. I actually do this with regularity, quite a bit. Call it part of the obsession. I realized as I drove, I had more to do than a simple survivor annuity application. I had to deal with bureaucratic annoyances galore as well. For example, this request for a survivor annuity was 9 years old. The retiree had died 9 years before. Human Resources Command at Fort Knox was going to reject it. They do this automatically for survivor requests more than 6 years old. This is in accordance with a law called the Barring Act, which disallows back payment of government obligations older than 6 years. I had to prepare an appeal to the Army Board for the Correction of Military Records. They were the only entity with the authority to overturn the rejection. Even if the board agreed with the appeal, they still have the obstacle of the Barring Act. I had learned a year and a half before that a waiver can be obtained for this limitation as well, up to $25,000. I would have to write the request for a waiver also. I know this all sounds like the whining of a soft-handed office worker. Well, I wasn't always an office guy. I was a real soldier once, and the loyalties you develop don't wither away rapidly. We are talking about the welfare of a military family member, by the way. I experienced the same requirement to help her that I did when I lost friends while overseas. An overwhelming compulsion to do whatever must be done for the families of the fallen. This wasn't just another task for a desk monkey. It was a mission to help someone in need. I had just developed my plan fully when I received another call from Mrs. Jackson as I neared the police station. She was going to be an hour late because she was still looking for records I had asked her to bring with her. I had asked her to bring whatever she could find. This was actually a good sign for me. It would give me time to prepare all of the items I would need to assist her to the fullest. I arrived at the police station and set up my equipment. The deputy chief had assigned another policeman to escort me. He had texted me saying he couldn't be there because his wife would have his hide if he didn't get home soon. The officer who met me was a member of the Air National Guard and completely sympathetic to my mission. As with any two service members, when they get together, we shot the bull for a while. Finally, though, I had to get to work. Mrs. Jackson would be there soon. And she was. I had only been working for about half an hour when she showed up early. Well, earlier than our new meeting time. She was already in tears. It was her husband's birthday. She told us as she entered the conference room that she had imagined I was actually there to tell her that he was actually alive. Oh, how I wish that had been the case, how I wish I had that kind of news for her. Instead, I was only there to tell her about service benefits and money, how those pale compared to the loss of a loved one. Mrs. Jackson and I did nothing but talk for an hour. She would reminisce about her husband, and I would listen. Occasionally, I would ask a question. Sometimes it was something I needed for one of the many packets that were going to be prepared, and sometimes it was just conversational. I was reminded that she was 10 years younger than her husband, and learned also that she was working full-time to support herself. After a while, we slowly got to the business of our meeting. I started by showing her the amount of the survivor annuity. I apologized for the fact that it was only going to be $334 per month. She stated that paltry sum would make a great difference in her life. That is when I learned that her take-home pay from her job was only $1,500 per month. I then showed her the first 6 years of back pay that she could expect once she got everything fixed up. $24,400. If the waiver to the Barring Act is granted, there would be another $10,000. That is a total of over $34,000. Her eyes became misty again at this point. Admittedly, I became the same way upon seeing her reaction. I asked if she was paying a premium for employer-provided health insurance. She said yes. I brought up the TRICARE coverage she had actually had since her husband's 60th birthday. She never knew. She started to cry in earnest now. I didn't know he did all this for me, she said. The policeman accompanying us gave her a tissue for her tears. We talked some more. During the chat, she mentioned her husband had served in Vietnam. I perked up again and asked to see the DD-214 from his Vietnam service. She showed it to me. I asked if her husband's death was somehow related to his service. As we discussed it, I decided it just might be. Things had just improved for her yet again. You see, there is a stipend from the Veterans Administration called Dependency and Indemnity Compensation, or DIC. It is a monthly amount of $1,557.95. One moment. Okay, I just went and checked. I was wrong on that amount. It's $1,257.95 per month. This is paid to spouses of members who die from service-connected causes. Now, it does offset the survivor annuity dollar for dollar, which means it would completely wipe out the $334 per month. However, there is another type of payment called the Special Survivor Indemnity Allowance, SSIA, which is added to whatever remains of the survivor annuity, if any, and to the DIC. It would be another $310 per month. This allowance, by the way, is set to expire in 30 September 2017, unless it is extended by Congress. I then made an appointment for her to meet with a veteran service officer, VSO, in my area who could help her apply for it. I thought it was worth the effort. $1,567.95 per month beats $334 no matter what type of math you're using. I finally told Mrs. Mrs. Jackson, about all of the bureaucratic hoops through which we'd have to jump in order to get all of this arranged for her, but added that the chances were excellent. She admitted that everything seemed quite surreal to her, and stated that it was as if her husband were still watching over her. The policeman seconded that thought. We signed everything and chatted some more. I then saw Mrs. Jackson to the door and promised to meet her again when she came to see the VSO. I also thanked the police officer for sticking with us through the entire 3-hour ordeal. Overall, it was a good night. I desperately wanted a cigar and a glass of scotch by the time I got back to my apartment, though. I was exhausted but hopeful for Mrs. Jackson. Here's hoping that it all works out positively for her. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining me in the recounting of this story. I believe it is quite uplifting when all is said. It's incredible that I've done my best to summarize this event, and in writing the script for this video, or this podcast if you're listening to the audio version, has still amounted to 5 pages of written material. Who knows what it will be when I actually post it to my blog. I ask a favor. I ask that you spread the word about this event and the Fettinger Project. Who knows how many other service members and their families are experiencing similar circumstances. I hope the other retirement services officers out there will be willing to replicate our efforts. The results are invigorating, to say the least. I also ask that you spread this video around. This is the kind of thing that people need to know. They need to know about the efforts that RSOs are making. They need to know the effects this has on military families. If you'll do that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. Next week, we'll get back to our usual business of explaining service benefits. Until then, thank you for joining me, and thank you for your service.
If you liked what you heard on today's episode, then please go below and give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Also, please let other people know about this channel and the information it can provide for them. If you have questions or comments, then have no qualms about posting them in the comments section below. Please remember the RC Retirement YouTube channel and the RC Retirement website are not recognized or endorsed by the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs, or any other government agency. The information presented in these resources are for entertainment and informational purposes only. Also, the content of either of these resources should not be considered financial or legal advice. Please consult with your own legal counsel, accountant, and financial planner before making any decisions based on what you have learned here. As always, thank you for watching the RC Retirement YouTube channel.